Hey friends, did you know that Azure databases can provide REST and GraphQL APIs to simplify your create, read, update, and delete capabilities? Davide and Thomas are here to show me how it works today on Azure Friday. Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman and it's Azure Friday. I'm here with Davide and Thomas, and I'm going to learn all about how to access databases as REST or GraphQL. How is this possible? Where's the magic?
Hey, Scott. We're so excited to be here. Today, we're going to be talking about two separate features: static web apps database connections and what lies under the scenes data API builder. We have a really great demo prepared for you today, and we're super excited to demo this.
I'm excited to see it. This is going to be good. I love good demos.
Okay, excellent. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I want to talk about static web apps and database connections to start. So, database connections is actually a new feature that we're introducing for static web apps that makes it easier for you to connect your static web apps to your existing Azure databases. And to do this, we actually provide you with a provisioned set of REST or GraphQL endpoints that allow you to make those CRUD requests to your database contents. And you get a bunch of functionality out of the box with built-in authorization and relationships. And we're going to dive into all of that today.
I love it. That's great. And the CRUD is those create, read, update, delete, the stuff that we do every day.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I actually have this demo prepared for you. Today, we're going to jump into and build out a basic application. I have this existing database with a list of books, and we're going to display these in a web application. So right now, I have a web application loaded up here. It's a very basic index.html, and I have this function where we load the books. And now we're going to connect our database. So the first thing we're going to do is sort of initialize this database connection. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and sort of initialize this database connection. I'm connecting to my MS SQL database, and I've already set up my connection string so that I don't have to leak any secrets. And just like that, we've created our configuration file to decide which entities to expose from our database. So in this configuration file, we have the data source, which points to that database with that connection string that I mentioned, a couple of runtime configs. And here in the entities object, that's actually where we get to decide which entities we want to expose. So in this case, I had it already in my clipboard, but if I wanted to expose the book entity, which has the dbo.books table, and then just some simple permissions allowing any action for any anonymous user, this is how I do it.
Right. And
So
you're not
once,
exposing
yeah,
the database, you're exposing the API on top of the database, because we're going to go from client over REST to Magic and then to the database. We're not exposing our databases to the internet.
exactly. So what we're essentially doing is we're provisioning this set of either REST or GraphQL APIs. And that's what allows us to sort of have this mapping between our database and the entity, which I'll show you in our GraphQL and our REST how to see that. And then we can layer on a series of permissions so that we don't simply expose our database and our APIs with all permissions to the internet. We still have that fine-grained authorization layer.
Very cool.
Okay, so with this configuration, now what we can do is start our application. I'm going to be using the swa start command. So let me go ahead and show you. Let me just restart because I couldn't show you. We're using the SWA CLI because we want to emulate the database connections feature. And then we're just going to pass along the folder containing our configuration.
So right now we're doing all of this locally. You're having an emulator locally. The SWA,
Exactly.
the Static Web Apps API, CLI rather, knows about
Exactly.
this new DB connections feature. So everything's now cloudless so far.
Exactly. Right now, we're just focusing on the local development experience, and we're making sure that it matches what we expect to have in the cloud.
Cool.
So once I've run my application locally with the SWA CLI, I can show you that just from here, I'm using Insomnia to show you, in this case, my GraphQL endpoints. But right now, I have a series of queries and mutations that I now have on my endpoint. So localhost 4280 was that address that our local development emulator is running on. And then we have this data API convention where we expose either the REST or GraphQL at this root, and then our GraphQL here in this case. And
Okay.
then we
And
have this.
Insomnia,
Yep.
for those who may not know, it's like Postman, it's a REST or GraphQL client. So you're
Yes,
not calling
exactly.
this from your web app yet. You're calling it from, in this case, Insomnia.
Yep. I just wanted to show you that with this, we can get the GraphQL docs, and then we can see the different queries that we have, the different entities that we're exposing. And right now, we're only exposing the book entity like we configured. So since we now have this series of GraphQL and REST endpoints, we can actually go and edit our application to make use of those entities. So here I'm in my index.html. I'm going to edit this load books function, and I'm going to make a simple REST request. So once again, I'm going to that convention slash data API dash slash REST, and then I'm going to be calling the book entity. And then I have this specific filtering here where I'm able to get the first 5 results that I get. And then I'm basically sending off the fetch request. So at this point, I can basically just go up into my browser and test this out. And what we see is that from here, let me go ahead and show you the network tab. There we go. And then I'll just refresh the page. So here, we're actually making a fetch request. If I can make any of this bigger, smaller. Here, let me go ahead and show you. So here we're making that GET request to that slash data API. And just like that, we're getting the contents of our application and we're displaying it in our index.html.
Did you have to do any kind of security concerns? You're just talking back to yourself here, like you're talking on port 4280?
Yep, exactly. So as you can see, there's no additional need for CORS configuration or anything like that. It comes out basically at the same slash data API endpoint, similar
I
to
see.
how Static Web Apps does functions or API integration.
Okay. But again, cloudless, we're doing this development, we're on an airplane, we haven't put it in the cloud yet. At some point, we're going to learn how to do that, right?
Yes, exactly. So now I want to show you how we put this in the cloud. So I'm going to head on over back to my VS Code. I'm going to go ahead and just simply add everything here because I've already created a static web app for this ahead of time. All right, go ahead, add, commit, push the standard. And as we can see, we're going to head on over here. And now in the background, I have a GitHub Actions running. And then that's going to deploy to my static web app. And the only thing that we have to deploy or that is being deployed right now is that additional configuration file that decides which entities we're exposing.
Interesting. So I didn't need to go
Yep,
and tell Static, I didn't need to turn it on inside of Static Web Apps in the portal?
we're actually going to go turn it on right now.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So when we're in the portal, we can head on over to our static web app. And then when we go to the database connection tab, we can go and select which database we want to connect to, depending on the environment. So right now, I'm going to be connecting my production environment and linking it to a database. So here, I have an Azure SQL database. My resource group, we tried to make this as simple as possible for you to.
No, this is very clean, very easy.
Yeah. And so I selected my server and my database, and then I simply have to give my authentication credentials. There we go. And I went ahead and configured my database ahead of time to make sure that there weren't any networking issues or anything like that. But just like that, I've linked my database, and now I can show you that in my static web apps, if I went ahead and refreshed, we can see that we're making that GET request to that book entity the same way we had it configured locally. And we're actually getting those contents from our database the same way we had it for our local development. So in that first one, it took a bit of time because of our cold start. But after that, we're getting a pretty quick response from our database.
That's so cool. This is great. And certainly we're using this with static web apps, but I assume that could I call this from a mobile app or could another client use this? What are the rules?
So that's exactly why I brought along Davide to talk about Data API Builder and the engine that's under the hood powering this entire experience.
Very exciting. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. And thanks, Scott. Yeah, let me show what lies behind the scene. Let me go on and share my screen very quickly. So this is the architecture that basically Thomas just shown. And as you can see, inside database connection, there is something called Data API Builder. Now, Data API Builder is this service or this project we have built in the open source, because Data API Builder is open source, and we just have integrated with also Static Web Apps to make it even easier to use. But you can go and use it on your own in case you want to do something outside the Static Web App boundaries. But it's just a open source project released under MIT license that if I have to just summarize what it does is take your database, no matter what it is. It can be Azure SQL, SQL Server, MySQL, Cosmos DB, Postgres, and turn it into a REST or GraphQL endpoint. And then from that on, you can use it to build static web apps or mobile application or microservice architecture, anything. Because the main point of Data API Builder is to remove the burden from a developer to basically create the CRUD code to take a table, a view, or a storage procedure and make it available as an API, which is today the common request for accessing data into a database, right? So it is exactly what it is. A free tool that you can use on premises or online to basically turn your database into APIs. Now, something I would like to show you is a little bit more complex configuration file. I'm using exactly the one that Thomas used. I'm just adding a little bit of spice if you want, because I'm also adding another entity, the series table. And as you can probably imagine, I have my books, and each book is related to a series, for example, the Foundation series, Isaac Asimov. And with GraphQL, for example, and that's why one of the reasons you want to use GraphQL is that you can navigate from one entity to another in just one HTTP request instead of having to do more than one. Let's say you want to have a series and all the books that belong to that series. Well, that's exactly.
I see. So you're doing a projection. You're doing a view of sorts.
Basically, yes. But on two different API, that's what makes GraphQL so interesting, because you can reduce the number of requests. And in this case here, I'm asking for a series. And as you can see, we support filtering, ordering, pagination, and projection, of course. So let's say you want to get the Foundation series and all the books within it. So thanks to the relationship that we added in the configuration file, we can also give you that ability. Now, you may be asking, why do you need to create a relationship at all if you have a relational database behind the scene where probably you have a foreign key? Well, first of all, you may not have a foreign key, even if I strongly recommend you to have. So we wanted to support all the possible scenarios. But also, we need to make sure that whatever we expose an API is something you agreed to expose. Because, again, turning your data into an API can pose some security risks. So we want to make sure that you are in absolute control on what is exposed and how. So that's why we are a little bit, verbose in asking you what you want to expose. In this case, you are exposing the relationship. And you can also, of course, define a more kind of stricter security. For example, here I could say only the only action you can do if you are not authenticated is reading. Otherwise, if you are authenticated, you can do any action. So you can also define security at the entity level. You can even define the security at the item level. Maybe I want you, Scott, to only be able to access the Foundation items. I can do that too. It's pretty complete and that just helps developer to remove all the plumbing code from their day-to-day work.
Wow, that is really cool. The authenticated, what kinds of authentications are we using here? Is it an API key? There's various levels and kinds of authentication?
That's right. So if you are using Static Web Apps, which is the default option, we just rely on Static Web Apps and Easy Auth. So you have Twitter, GitHub, Azure Active Directory already. Super easy to configure. You don't have to go and do all the auth configuration that sometimes are complex. If for any reason you want to run Data API Builder on your own, not using Static Web Apps, let's say you want to host it in a container, in a Kubernetes cluster, you can configure Azure Active Directory. And then, of course, then you have to set up Azure Active Directory correctly, but that will work too.
Wow. Static Web Apps is known for being really affordable. It's just a great system. I initially thought it was for static web apps, and now we're seeing it's just for so many things. Am I going to have to start paying for a full app service or a VM in order to run this database builder?
No, right now it's actually free of charge. Well, first of all, it's now in public preview, so it's free of charge for that reason. But also, it will be free of charge up to a certain kind of free level, just like static web apps are free of charge, because we really want to help developers to be efficient, even if they are building something simple and maybe not, just for the fun of it. So absolutely, there will be a version of Data API Builder that will be free in Azure. But I just want you to remember that Data API Builder is already free today because it's an open source project. You can just download it and use it.
Right. And I assume it'll scale to as big as my database will scale, right? I mean, we have Azure Database behind this, so
that's right.
I would.
Yeah. If you use it with any database, of course, Azure SQL is my favorite since I'm coming from that team. But you can easily scale up and out because Data API Builder is a completely stateless solution. So you can create an AKS cluster with hundreds of them if you really need to sustain a lot of load, and then pass the query to the database. We try to optimize all the query we generate really, really carefully. The work done by the Data API Builder team is basically done together with the database team. So all databases participating in this project basically gave their engineering time in order to make sure that all the query we generate are super perfect. So yeah, we took care of all the best practices and hopefully the performance for you.
Wow, this is fantastic. So I want to get started on this right now. I'm already thinking about. I have 11 different static web apps myself in Azure. I want to figure out how I can get started. Where do I go to do this as soon as we're done here?
Yeah, the easiest way to start is go to the Data API Builder website. That's the full URL, or you can go aka.ms/DAB, and then you will get basically access to the GitHub repository. And then we have also plenty of samples, end-to-end samples. And also there is a full documentation on the Static Web Apps website with full getting started documentation. So you're covered. You can really start from scratch and be, productive in, let's say, some minutes.
Fantastic. This is so great. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining me today.
Thank you, Scott, for having us.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. I am learning all about how to access databases as REST or GraphQL APIs using static web apps database connections today on Azure Friday. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Azure Friday. Now I need you to like it, comment on it, tell your friends, retweet it. Watch more Azure Friday.